She was a black woman standing alone in a luxury jewelry store, holding the most important work of her career in her hands. When the door opened, and everything she had spent 4 months rebuilding shattered. Her ex-husband walked in like he always did, like the room owed him something. Like the restraining order she had been too afraid to finalize was just a piece of paper. Like the 4 years he had spent slowly erasing her had given him a permanent claim on wherever she stood. He found her arm first, then her throat. In the middle of a white marble floor, under warm amber lights, surrounded by glass cases holding pieces worth more than most people earn in a year. Marcus put his hands on Lyra like she was property he had misplaced. The security guard didn't move. The attendants looked away. The entire store held its breath and did nothing. And then, a voice cut through the silence. Calm down. Quiet. Absolutely. She's going to want her arm back. No one had noticed the Korean man standing at the back of the room. No one had looked closely enough to see the dragon tattoo climbing the right side of his neck, or the black suit cut so precisely it looked like it had been designed for exactly this moment, or the particular stillness of a man who has never needed to raise his voice, because the people around him have already learned what happens when he does. Jang Tae-Won was the most dangerous man in that room, and he had just decided that what was happening to Lyra was now his business. What he revealed next about the ring, the debt, and the secret Lyra never knew she was carrying, and what she chose to do with a card that had no name on it before she walked out of that store, will stay with you long after this story ends. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave your like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click Become a Member to be part of our community and help us keep going. The jewelry store on Cavendish Avenue had a particular kind of silence. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of money. The kind that made people lower their voices without being asked, that made heels click a little more carefully against the white marble, that made everyone present acutely aware of how much everything around them cost and how little of it belonged to them. Lyra Danielle Osei walked through those glass doors at 2:47 in the afternoon, carrying a caramel-structured handbag on her forearm and a velvet case in her right hand. And she did not lower her voice or slow her steps. She had earned her place in this room. She had spent 63 days designing the piece inside that case, 3 of them sleepless, and today was the day it would finally leave her hands and enter the world. She did not know that the world had other plans. The store manager, a thin man with silver-framed glasses and the perpetual expression of someone waiting for something to go wrong, greeted her at the counter with a careful smile. The piece was extraordinary, he told her. The client would be very pleased. She signed the delivery protocol with steady hands and allowed herself, just for a moment, the quiet satisfaction of work completed. The ring she had created sat inside that velvet case like a captured breath, an emerald cut with a precision that took her 2 weeks to perfect. Set in white gold, with a detail along the band that no other designer in the city would have thought to put there. She did not know the ring had a history she was never meant to learn. She did not know that 4 months ago, while she was still sleeping in the same house as a man who had stopped deserving her long before she found the courage to leave, that ring had been offered as collateral for a debt she knew nothing about. That the debt had been sold. That the person who now held that debt worked indirectly through 3 layers of untraceable transactions for a man who was standing at the back of the store at that exact moment. examining a pocket watch with no particular urgency. Jang Tae-Won did not look like the most dangerous man in the room. He rarely did. That was, in many ways, the point. He wore a black suit cut so precisely to his frame that it looked like it had grown there. His white shirt was open at the collar, not carelessly, but with the deliberate ease of a man who had nothing to prove. The dragon tattoo on the right side of his neck moved almost imperceptibly when he tilted his head, the black ink riding the line of his jaw toward his ear. His hands were still. His expression was still. His eyes moved constantly, cataloging everything in the room with the quiet efficiency of someone who had spent 20 years treating public spaces as chessboards. He noticed Lyra the moment she walked in. Not because of how she looked, though the moss green dress and the way she carried herself drew the eye, but because he recognized her work. The piece in that case had been commissioned through 3 intermediaries, specifically to keep her from knowing his name. He had wanted the ring. He had not anticipated wanting to know the person who made it. He was still holding that thought when the glass door opened behind her with a force that had nothing to do with the weight of the door. Marcus Deshawn Whitfield filled the entrance the way a storm fills a room. Not with sound immediately, but with pressure. The temperature shifted. The 2 store attendants exchanged a glance. The security guard near the door straightened without taking a step forward, reading the room with the particular paralysis of someone who has been trained to de-escalate but not to truly intervene. Tae-Won did not move. He watched. Marcus's eyes found Lyra in 3 seconds. He had recognized her car outside, the detail that had confirmed what he'd already suspected when a contact told him the ring had surfaced at Orem Prestige. He had driven here in 17 minutes with the specific and practiced momentum of a man who had learned, over years of marriage, that speed was its own form of control. If he arrived before she could think, she would react instead of resist. He had miscalculated one variable. Lyra. The name came out flat and hard, the way he always said it when he wanted her to feel the weight of being known by him. She heard it before she turned, and in the half-second before her body completed the motion, every muscle in her shoulders tightened with a memory older than thought. She turned slowly. She had learned, over 4 years, that turning slowly was safer than flinching. Marcus. Her voice was even. She held the delivery protocol clipboard against her chest like it was something to hold on to. I don't know how you found me here. Your car is outside. He said it like it was an explanation for everything. He was already moving toward her, and the store attendant, who stepped slightly forward, froze when Marcus turned the full weight of his expression toward him. The attendant stepped back. This was the thing no one who hadn't lived inside that marriage understood. Marcus Deshawn Whitfield was not a man who shouted in public. He was a man who created invisible walls in public, who made entire rooms defer to him through something that didn't have a legal name and couldn't be photographed. He was the kind of dangerous that looked, to any outsider watching, like a confident man having a conversation with his wife. The ring, he said, lowering his voice now that he was close enough that lowering it still carried. I know it's here. I know that's why you came. I came because I was commissioned to create a piece for a client. She kept her eyes on his face and her voice below the register of the attendants at the far counter. I don't know anything about whatever you did with... Don't. The word landed like a hand on a table. Don't make me look like I'm lying, Lyra. Not here. Not in front of... You put up a ring as collateral for a debt you never told me about, she said, and she felt the words leave her body like something that had been waiting for air. While we were still married, that ring is now legally... He grabbed her arm. It was not the first time. The particular way his hand closed around her forearm. Thumb pressed inward, fingers wrapping to the back, had its own muscle memory for both of them. For him, it was punctuation. For her, it was the sound of a door she thought she had closed forever swinging open. The store went silent in a different way than before. He's going to want her arm back. The voice came from behind Marcus and slightly to the left. Not loud, not close, but positioned in a way that made it arrive everywhere in the room simultaneously. The kind of voice that had spent years calibrating exactly how much space it needed to fill. Marcus turned. Jang Tae-Won stood 7 feet away with his hands loose at his sides, the pocket watch gone, both hands visible, completely relaxed. He looked at Marcus the way a man looks at a calculation he has already finished. "This is a private conversation," Marcus said. "This is my store." Tae-Won said it without inflection, as a correction rather than a claim. "Which means there are no private conversations here that I don't permit." Marcus released Lyra's arm, not because he chose to, but because the architecture of the room had shifted and he hadn't caught up yet. He was the kind of man who needed a moment to locate the new hierarchy. And in that moment, he made the mistake of trying to re-establish the old one. "I don't know who you are," Marcus said, drawing himself up. "But this woman is my wife, and whatever is in that case belongs to ex-wife." Tae-Won's eyes moved briefly to Lyra, not with warmth, with precision. Then back to Marcus. "The distinction matters legally. I assume you know that, given that you're already losing the proceedings." The color in Marcus's face changed. Tae-Won continued with the same measured pace, unhurried, as if he were reading aloud from a document he had memorized some time ago. Marcus Deshawn Whitfield, Apex Luxury Motors on 5th. $340,000 in outstanding personal debt across 4 creditors. One of those creditors transferred the note 8 weeks ago to a holding company. That holding company, a pause so brief it almost wasn't there, reports to me. The room had become a single held breath. Marcus looked at the 2 men who had appeared near the entrance without sound, without announcement, the way furniture appears in a room when you weren't watching. He looked back at Tae-Won. And for the first time in the 4 years Lyra had known him, the 4 years she had spent learning the geography of his moods to keep herself safe, she watched Marcus Whitfield not know what to do next. It was the most frightening thing she had ever seen him do. Because a man who always knows what to do next, suddenly lost? That was when the unpredictable entered the room. Tae-Won seemed to know this too. He took 1 step forward. Not toward Marcus, just forward, recalibrating the geometry of the space so that Lyra was no longer the closest person to the man whose hands had just been on her. "The ring," Tae-Won said quietly, "is not what you came for." Marcus looked at him. "You came because she's building something without you, and you cannot tolerate that." He let the sentence settle. "I've seen that before. I know exactly where it goes." The silence that followed was the kind that rearranges things. Marcus stood in the center of it, and Lyra watched him the way she had learned to watch him. Not directly, but with her peripheral vision, reading the small signals that preceded larger ones. The jaw tightening, the weight shifting to his left foot, the way his right hand opened and closed once at his side, as if practicing something. She had spent 4 years becoming fluent in that language. She had spent the last 4 months trying to forget it. "You don't know anything about me," Marcus said, and his voice had dropped into a register she recognized. The one that meant he had decided that the audience no longer mattered. That whatever happened next, he had already accepted the consequences. "Or about her. Or about what we had." "What you had is documented in a restraining order application filed 11 weeks ago," Tae-Won said. Withdrawn 3 days later. Lyra felt the breath leave her body. She had told no one about the withdrawal. She had told herself it was strategic, that she needed more time, more evidence, a better lawyer. She had told herself a great many things in those 3 days, and in the quiet of the nights that followed, she had not entirely believed any of them. But she had believed, with the desperate certainty of someone who has very little left to hold on to, that no one knew. She looked at Tae-Won. He was not looking at her. He was still watching Marcus with that same expression of completed calculation, and something about the precision of what he had just revealed, the fact that he had known and chosen this exact moment to say it, sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with fear of him specifically, and everything to do with the sudden understanding of exactly how much of her life existed in rooms she had never entered. Marcus laughed. It came out wrong, too short, too high, the laugh of a man who has just been shown a mirror he didn't ask for. So you did your homework. That's supposed to impress her? Supposed to impress me? I'm not trying to impress either of you. Tae-Won tilted his head slightly toward the velvet case on the counter. I'm trying to finish a transaction that was interrupted. That ring is a commissioned piece, contracted, created, and delivered by an independent designer to a verified client. A pause. The legal status of any prior arrangement you made with that emerald is a matter for your creditors, your lawyers, and the family court judge who is, according to my understanding, not particularly sympathetic to your position. He looked at Marcus directly. You came here to take something that is no longer yours. I am telling you that this is not a place where that happens. Marcus took a step forward. It was not a large step. It was the kind of step that, in a different room, in a different context, might have meant nothing. But Lyra's body knew it immediately, knew the specific weight distribution of it, the way it was never about the destination, but about the signal. I am still capable of this. You have not removed that from me. She did not step back. That was new. 4 months of distance had done something she hadn't fully measured until this moment. Her feet stayed where they were, and she felt the unfamiliar architecture of her own stillness like something she was trying on for the first time. Tae-Won moved, not dramatically, not with the choreographed speed of someone performing intervention. He simply relocated himself. One fluid step that placed him between Marcus and the counter, between Marcus and Lyra, with the unhurried naturalness of water filling a space. His hands remained at his sides. His expression did not change. But the distance between him and Marcus was now close enough that any further forward movement would become a different category of decision. She withdrew the application, Marcus said, and his voice cracked somewhere in the middle of it. Not with grief, but with the particular desperation of a man arguing a case he knows he has already lost. That means something. That means she was scared, Tae-Won said. And for the first time, something shifted beneath the surface of his voice. Not much. A degree. Enough. It doesn't mean what you want it to mean. Lyra felt her throat tighten. Because he was right. And the rightness of it landed in a place she had been carefully not looking at for 11 weeks. The cold, specific truth that she had withdrawn the application not because she had forgiven Marcus or doubted herself, but because the night before the filing deadline, she had sat in her car outside the courthouse for 40 minutes and felt, with a clarity that shamed her, that she was more afraid of what came after than of what she was already surviving. Fear had a grammar she had become too fluent in. It was the grammar of the familiar, even when the familiar was destroying her. You need to leave, Tae-Won said to Marcus. His voice had returned to its baseline, flat, even, final. Not because I'm asking. because the alternative to leaving involves a conversation with people who are considerably less patient than I am, about a debt that is currently in a very flexible state of collection. A beat. I can make that flexibility disappear before you reach the door, or I can let it remain. That decision is yours, and you have approximately 30 seconds to make it. Marcus looked at Lyra. She looked back, and in that look passed everything that 4 years contained. Every night she had rearranged herself to fit the shape of his moods. Every morning she had read his face before she spoke. Every small erasure she had performed on herself to keep the temperature in the room from rising. It passed between them like a document being returned to its author. She did not look away. It was Marcus who broke the line of it. His eyes dropped first, to the floor, to his own hands, to somewhere that wasn't her face. He turned. He walked past the 2 men at the entrance, who moved aside without touching him, and through the glass door, which closed behind him with the same quiet efficiency of everything else in that room. The store exhaled. The marble floor held the silence the way marble always does, completely, without apology. Lyra stood with her hand still raised slightly at her side, fingers curved where she had almost reached for something that wasn't there. The store attendants had found reasons to occupy themselves at the far end of the room. The security guard near the door was looking at a fixed point on the wall with the studied neutrality of a man who has decided, professionally, that he witnessed nothing. The 2 men who had appeared near the entrance were gone. Not through the door, simply gone, the way certain presences dissolve when they are no longer needed. Only Tae-Won remained, and he was not looking at her. He had returned to the counter and was standing before the velvet case with his hands at his sides, studying the ring inside it with the same quiet attention he might give a contract. The emerald caught the amber store lighting and held it, green and cold and precise. The way she had intended it, the way she had spent 14 hours on the setting alone to achieve. She had not known, when she designed it, who it was for. She was not entirely sure, standing here now, that she knew what that meant. You knew about the restraining order, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Yes. For how long? It was not quite a question. He seemed to understand this. Long enough, he said, which was not an answer, and both of them knew it, and neither of them addressed that directly, because the specific number of days would have clarified something that was, at this moment, better left with its edges soft. Lyra walked to the counter. She stood beside him, not close, but in the same gravitational field, and looked at the ring she had made. From this angle, with this light, she could see the small imperfection in the band that no one else would ever notice. A 0.5 millimeter deviation in the engraving that had kept her awake on the 41st night, because she could not decide if it was a flaw or a decision. She had eventually decided it was a decision. She had left it. Why the commission? She said. You could have bought any ring in this city. I wanted that one. You didn't know it existed before you commissioned it. I knew the person who would make it existed. He paused. I had seen your other work. There is a pendant in a private collection in Seoul that you made 3 years ago. The owner showed it to me once and told me the name of the designer. I remembered it. Another pause. Briefer. I remember things that are made with that kind of attention. Lyra looked at the side of his face. He was not performing this. That was the thing she kept arriving at and could not entirely process. The absence of performance in a man who, by every structural measure of his life, had every reason to perform constantly. There was no angle she could find in what he was saying, because he was not arranging words toward a destination. He was simply saying what was true, in the order it was true, without decoration. It was, she realized with a discomfort she could not immediately name, the most Honest conversation she had been in for longer than she could easily calculate. "You said I was yours," she said. He turned then. Not his whole body, just enough. His eyes found hers with the directness of someone who does not use eye contact as a weapon, but as a simple instrument of accuracy. "I said you were under the protection of this space," he said. The phrasing was a slight pause. Compressed. He needed to hear something specific. "Yes." And I needed to hear something different. He held her gaze. "Yes." The word landed quietly and stayed there, and Lyra felt something shift in her chest, not dramatically, not with the operatic force of a feeling that announces itself, but with a small, tectonic movement of something that has been held in one position for a very long time, beginning, almost imperceptibly, to move. She looked back at the ring. "I left a flaw in the band," she said. "On purpose. 41st night. I couldn't sleep, and I made a decision about imperfection." She wasn't sure why she was saying this. She said it anyway. "Most clients never see it." Tae-Won looked down at the ring. He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into the case, carefully, with the same deliberate precision with which he did everything, and lifted it toward the light. She watched his eyes find it. The half-millimeter deviation. The decision she had made alone at 2 a.m. on the 41st night. "I see it," he said. And then he placed the ring back in the case and closed it, and picked up a card from the inner pocket of his jacket and set it on the counter beside the velvet. A single number, no name. "The payment will arrive tomorrow morning," he said. "Full amount, plus a 15% addition for the delay in the original commission timeline." He stepped back from the counter. "The delay was caused by circumstances connected to my holding company's acquisition of the debt. It created complications for you indirectly. The addition is appropriate." Lyra stared at the card. "You're apologizing," she said slowly, "for the fact that the man who made my life difficult for 4 years owed money to someone who works for you." "I am correcting an imbalance," he said. "Apologies are for things done intentionally." She almost laughed. It came up and stopped just before it arrived, caught somewhere between genuine and bewildered. That is a very convenient distinction. It is an accurate one. She picked up the card. It was matte black, no texture, no name, just 11 digits in small, clean type. She turned it once in her fingers. "You are a dangerous man," she said. "Yes." "And somewhere in this building, there are people whose job it is to make problems disappear." "Yes." "And you want me to believe that what happened today was simply," she gestured vaguely at the room, "a transaction, a correction of an imbalance." Tae-Won was quiet for a moment. In that moment, something moved behind his eyes. Old and specific, and not entirely controlled, the way grief moves when it has been kept in a formal container for a very long time, and briefly, just briefly, presses against the glass. "I had a sister," he said. The past tense arrived in the room and stayed there, heavy and final. "She was 24. There was a man who..." He stopped, reorganized. "I was 3 hours away when I received the call. I have spent 15 years being faster than 3 hours." He looked at the door Marcus had walked through. "Today I was already in the room." Lyra did not speak. There was nothing to say that would not make it smaller. After a moment, Tae-Won straightened. The grief returned to wherever he kept it. The surface of him resumed its characteristic stillness, smooth and impenetrable and careful. And she understood now that the stillness was not coldness. It was the architecture of a man who had built walls not to keep people out, but to keep something in. To keep the 3 hours too late from leaking into everything. "You should go," he said. "Not because I want you to. Because you have work to do. And a life that is, as of today, somewhat less complicated than it was this morning." She picked up her caramel handbag from the counter where she had set it down. It felt like hours ago, and held it on her forearm. She looked at the velvet case, at the card in her hand, at the man standing beside her, who had walked into the geometry of her worst moment and rearranged it without asking permission, and without asking for anything in return. "Not yet," said a small voice somewhere underneath her relief. "Not yet." She did not say this aloud. She filed it in the same drawer where she kept the 41st night, and the decision about imperfection, and all the other things she was still deciding what to do with. She walked toward the door. "Lyra." She stopped, did not turn immediately, then did. Tae-Won was standing exactly where she had left him, one hand resting lightly on the closed velvet case. The amber light caught the dragon on his neck, the black ink moving with his breath. "The flaw in the ban," he said. "I want you to know I would have bought the ring because of it, not despite it." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked through the glass door, into the afternoon light with a card in her hand, and a question she did not yet know how to ask sitting quietly in her chest. The question of what it costs to be saved by someone who lives in the dark, and whether the cost is different if the dark is where you finally feel seen. The store returned to its particular silence behind her. Tae-Won stood alone in it for a moment longer than necessary, his hand still on the velvet case, his eyes on the door. Then he picked up the ring and kept it. If this story stayed with you, take a moment and ask yourself, have you ever pulled back from something that could have protected you? Not because you stopped being afraid of the danger, but because you were more convinced of what came after. Have you ever been truly seen by someone the world told you to walk away from? And have you ever poured everything you had into something you created, only to watch someone who never deserved it try to take it as their own? Tell us your story in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in stories about protection, dignity, and the quiet courage it takes to finally let yourself be seen, leave your like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and click Seja Member to be part of our community and help the channel grow.